Welcome, everyone. We are sitting here with Azim Khamisa, who we had the good fortune to meet right before COVID, I believe, a few years ago at the IONS conference. For those of you not familiar with IONS, it's Institute of Noetic Sciences. You've had quite a journey, and many may be familiar with your story, but for those who haven't, I'm going to read a little bit of background on you so they can become acquainted with your history. So, committing his life to halt the continuing cycle of violence among youth, Azim Khamisa became a social activist after his 20-year-old college student son, Tariq, was murdered while delivering pizzas in 1995 by a 14-year-old gang member. Out of unspeakable grief and despair, Khamisa was inspired to transform his loss through the power of forgiveness, believing that there were victims at both ends of the gun. This led to the founding of the Tariq Khamisa Foundation, which is still in place today. Azim is also the co-founder of the Constant and Never-Ending Improvement Program and serves as vice chair of the Institute of Noetic Sciences, which we just spoke about. Azim's book, From Murder to Forgiveness, which was his first book, which we will talk about today, this was the first in a trilogy. It's called From Murder to Forgiveness, A Father's Journey. The other two books in this trilogy are Forgiveness to Fulfillment and From Fulfillment to Peace, the latter providing the final recipe for sustained peace. Azim's story has been featured in films and documentaries, and he's received countless awards for his efforts and work. So many awards, I couldn't even list one. There's just seems to be dozens and dozens and dozens. And this was even more mind-blowing, that you've given over 1,000 presentations to grade schools and university students and over 600 keynote speeches at conferences worldwide. That's incredible. So we are so honored to have you with us here today.
Well, thank you, Renee, for having me.
So anyway, we wanted to maybe rewind the clock a little bit for those who are new to your story. You know, it's interesting because when we met at IONS, I had already seen the TED video that had gone viral and talked about your story. And then when we met in person, it really just confirmed the authenticity that you demonstrate in your talks. So I want to just start out with a quote that you have said and get you to comment on it. We humans confront defining moments in our lives. Sometimes these events are joyous and sometimes they're tragedies. These moments, it's important to make the right choices. When we do, we are literally able to manifest a miracle and produce transformation in ourselves and others. Do you want to speak to that a bit for people?
Yeah, it's something that came to me after this tragedy. And sometimes in deep trauma or tragedy, there is a spark of clarity. Every saint has suffered the dark night of the soul. I practice as a Sufi Muslim, and my practice of meditation today is 2 hours. I used to be 1 hour when my son was alive. And I started to meditate when I was 20. I lost Tariq in my early 40s. So I had a strong spiritual foundation, which I believe saved me. And when I got the news, I had my first out-of-body experience. And I believe in God, and the pain was so excruciating that I couldn't be in my body, and I went into a loving embrace of God. I don't remember how long I was gone for. It was literally like a nuclear bomb that had gone off in my heart. But when the explosion subsided, God sent me back into my body with the wisdom that they are victims at both ends of the gun. So that didn't come from my intellect. I don't think us mortals are capable of it, or my loving heart. Rather, it was a download from a higher power. And that eventually led me to forgive him and reach out to his grandfather and guardian. After I started a foundation that's named after him called the Tariq Khamisa Foundation, with the mission of stopping kids from killing kids by breaking the cycle of youth violence. We essentially had three mandates. First was to save lives of children because we lose so many every hour. In this interview, we'll have lost another young soul. Second was to empower them with the right choices so they don't fall to the crack and choose lives of crime and gangs and drugs and alcohol and weapons. And thirdly, to teach the principles of nonviolence, of accountability, of empathy, of compassion, of forgiveness, and of peacemaking and peace building. So what I saw in this tragedy is that the enemy was not the 14-year-old who took my son's life, but rather the peer pressure that forced many young men and women in our society to fall to the crack and then get involved with gangs and crimes and drugs and alcohol and weapons. And this happened it'll be 28 years in January. The foundation I started 9 months after Tariq died. And we just completed our 27th year. And we're starting our 28th year. And we now have a safe school model, which has 4 programs for youth. And Berkeley University invited us to develop a program for parents based on the work we've done with the kids. And during COVID, we developed a program for teachers. So these 6 programs now comprise the safe school model. We specialize from 4th grade to 9th grade. Tony, who took Tariq's life, joined a gang in 6th grade and took the life of my son in 8th grade, believe it or not. And with the grace of the universe, the programs are delivering exemplary results. We are now going national. We have a second site in Pennsylvania, and we opened Colorado last May. So it's been a big part of my life.
I used to work in a lot of school systems myself. Are you starting to see more schools implementing this curriculum that you've developed into the schools so that children and the young adults can start implementing it and practicing it?
Absolutely. You know, as Renee talked about, I've given over 1,000 presentations to the foundation has now reached over a couple of million kids. I have over 100,000 letters. And I think your question, Anthony, is very appropriate. And I'd like to answer your question by a testimonial I just received from a high school senior at Bishop's. Bishop's, I live in La Jolla. Bishop's is a very high-end private school, over 100 years old. They have 800 students and 200 faculty. So the ratio is 1:4. And they invited me to speak there in November of 2019, both the students and faculty, just before the pandemic. And then I got this message from a student there by the name of Vanessa Brunetta. Hello, Mr. Khamisa. My name is Vanessa Brunetta. I am a senior at the Bishop School. Following your presentation on campus November 8th, last Friday, I had a very heartfelt encounter with you, and I really appreciate this time you took out of your day to listen to my story for a few minutes. I previously attended a middle school where you presented about 7 years ago and changed the outlook I had on life at the time. I have been in the foster care system since age 8, and your story and ability to spread the idea of peace inspired me to take the appropriate steps as a 13-year-old towards success. Following your presentation 7 years ago, my attitude towards the world no longer represented hatred, but took me down a path of forgiveness. Forgiveness of my biological mother, whom I deemed responsible for my being in the foster care system, and forgiveness of the world, whom I held accountable for all of my young confusion and pain. Today, as a senior, I'm extremely appreciative of the message you have and continue to spread, as it has not only changed my life 7 years ago, but still influences my daily journey. It was a pleasure meeting you 7 years ago, and again for a second time last week. Thank you again, Mr. Khamisa. Sincerely, Vanessa Brunetta. She graduated with the 5.0 and got a full ride at UCLA. And I was blown away by her. I could see the determination in this young lady. It wouldn't surprise me if she someday changes the foster care system in our country, or even maybe has a bigger job in our society. I met her when she was 13, as she points out, and hearing my story and being able to espouse forgiveness totally changed her trajectory, you know? And I have so many letters like this. So, and I started with a very simple premise that violence is a learned behavior. No child is born violent. Tony wasn't born violent. But if you accept that as an axiom or as a truism, then nonviolence can also be a learned behavior. But you have to teach it, because kids are not going to learn that through osmosis. And where do our kids learn nonviolence? I mean, this surprised me, and it might surprise you. By the time our kids enter grade 1, they're 6 or 7 years old. They've seen over 100,000 images of violence.
I bet.
Yeah, I mean, look at news, you know, if it bleeds, it leads.
Yeah.
Look at video games, look at movies, look at domestic violence, look at how many people we lose on the street. 100 people get shot every day in America.
Yeah. Now, I believe that, because I lived in the UK for a while, and, the gun laws were so strong there compared to ours. I mean, there was a lot of effort that you had to go through to get a gun. And also the images in the UK, at least when I studied media, international media in London, and, it wasn't as violent as it is here in the United States.
Nowhere near it. In fact, The Economist did a study. They took 25 countries in the world, first world countries like ours, England, where you were, Germany, France, Sweden, Japan, Australia, Canada, and they added all the kids that die in those 25 countries as a result of gun violence. They took the total and multiplied that by 11. That is how many we lose in the United States of America. I mean, I'm a first-generation American. I was born in Kenya, and I was educated in England. I spent 6 years in England, like you did, and in mathematics and finance. And I moved here in '74 after Idi Amin, who was in Uganda. I don't know if you remember him.
I do.
As a minority, we were all targeted. My mom's relatives were in Uganda, and my in-laws lived in Uganda, and they were all made, refugees overnight when Idi Amin was in power. So it was my job to get out and start a new life. And I emigrated to the US through Canada in 1974. I was married at that time, and I had a daughter who was 2 years old, and Tariq actually was born here. And then moved my entire family out in the next 2-3 years. So I'm a first-generation American, and I am proud to be an American. There's a lot of good in our country.
Yes, there is.
I'm not trying to knock it, but when it comes to violence, we
Mhm.
are a terrible example. And that's not good because the US, being the only superpower and the richest nation in the world, we have a tremendous impact on the global culture. What happens in the US eventually happens in the world, right? I mean, when you travel overseas, what do you see? You see, McDonald's and Kentucky Fried and Levi's and SUVs and American music and American movies. And while we are exporting some of the good stuff, we have built an amazing country in 246 some years, a free market, a meritocratic society, a democratic, well, that could be another conversation right now. That's not a lot.
Right.
But essentially, we built an amazing country in a very short span of time. But we are also exporting our violence. I'm sure you read there's more violence now in other parts, of the world, and a lot of copycats. So I think this really needs to get a handle. Guns are, as you mentioned, Renee, a big part of it. We have more guns in America than people. There's 400 million guns for 320 million people. I mean, it's crazy.
It is crazy. I mean, we have a global responsibility, I feel, as, like you said, that superpower voice out there. We have a responsibility, and like you, I mean, I've traveled. I lived in Kenya, by the way. I didn't know that about you. And I traveled through Uganda in let's see, let me think about that, 88, 87, 88, 89. Having traveled a lot and having been to places like New Zealand, I remember I was hitchhiking. And again, this was 20 years ago, 20, 30 years ago, probably now. But I was hitchhiking and this car picked me up and said, honey, you really shouldn't be hitchhiking because we had a murder in New Zealand in 1974. So there's this, that's like stark contrast, right? And, as you pointed out, like in Japan, we were there right before the pandemic and we saw these tiny little kids, 5, 6 years old. They're running around the Tokyo subway without their parents because it's safe.
Yeah.
It's safe. In Sweden, you can leave your kid in a stroller outside and go into the supermarket and buy groceries because you're not worried that anyone's going to steal your child.
No.
So I know I'm getting on my high horse, but this is, this is really stark, strong examples of how it's different.
Well, I mean, there's definitely solutions to our problem with gun violence. Australia did the gun buyback program. In England, even bobbies, or what they call cops, here don't carry guns. The training of becoming a cop is they don't train them. I think a hairdresser gets more training than a cop here, whereas they need to be trained. So they are there to de-escalate an issue, not add to it. So, and there are many solutions. You mentioned Japan. It's one of the strictest gun laws in the Scandinavian countries. So it's not like there are no solutions. I challenge whether the will of the people is there. I mean, we finally passed a Band-Aid gun law recently, after I don't know how many years. And the gun lobby is so strong in the United States. And during the pandemic, the numbers have gotten even worse. So, and we find ourselves are probably more divided. I've lived here almost 50 years. It'll be 50 years in 2024. I don't remember the United States being as divided as it is today.
Yeah.
Well, thinking about a civil war, I mean, it's very difficult times, and I really hope that we inspire better leaders because we definitely need better leaders. And my latest book is called "Leadership for the Greater Good: A Guide for Truth to Power Champions." because I feel, there's no shortage of leadership consultants and pundits and gurus. They're all over the place. And Lord knows how many leadership courses are out there. And yet we don't have good leaders. What's wrong with that math, And what I feel, which I think is important to share with you, is that we need leaders today that have competency in 3 areas. The typical American route to leadership is you do an undergrad, you do a postgrad, and maybe you do a PhD, or you become a lawyer or a doctor or a pilot or an astronaut or whatever. And you become a leader in your field. But we don't just live at home and work, we live in community. What would we do without community?
Right.
There would be no schools, no hospitals, no police, no rule of law. So I feel the leader we need today, sure, we need competency in your field of endeavor, because that's what makes you a leader. But you also need to take societal ills, they exist in every community, and create viable, affordable solution, much like I have done with youth violence. And thirdly, you need to espouse, teach, and role model strong ethical, moral, and spiritual values.
There you go.
So there you say, we need this triad of competency. How many leaders come to mind that possess this triad of competencies? Not many. But there are some. And in my book, I've picked a dozen, not the Nelson Mandelas and the Dalai Lamas and the people that might come to your mind, but ordinary people like myself that I have picked them from all religions, all nationalities, all genders, because those are not necessarily the distinction that creates leaders that are like this. In the hope that it inspires our future leaders to not just think about me, as the sign of the yuppie culture, which is what I grew up in, but to think of also community and get involved with taking on some of the challenges we have in our communities and creating some solutions that work and that are affordable.
I think, it's really positive to start seeing mindfulness practices being incorporated into both, small, mid-size, and Fortune 500 companies. Even if it is a PR ploy on some way, or, for whatever reason, why they're doing it, even if they're doing it not for the right reasons, the fact that it's happening is going to have a ripple effect.
Yes, we do need people that not only practice mindfulness, but get inner guidance, because we all have inner guidance. I even tell these kids that don't just rely on your intellect when you have a big decision to make. In fact, there's a great quote from Einstein that says, "We must take care not to make intellect our God." Sure, it has powerful muscle, but no personality. It cannot lead, it can only serve. There's nothing wrong with your intellect or a PhD, but most of us don't. I mean, 3% of this country have a PhD, and I don't either. Yes, I tell the kids that if you have an important decision, start with your intellect, and the more education you have, the better you are able to analyze the pros and the cons, because essentially your brain is an analytical tool. If it makes sense, then you go to your heart, because heart is where the emotion reside, and then you ask the question, does it feel good, right, and just? Because we all have a sense of what is good, right, and just. Don't stop there, because we've all done things we thought makes a lot of sense, that was really good, right, and just, and then we said, why did I do it? Especially when you're a teenager. Take the third step, which I don't think many do. If it makes sense, if it feels good, right, and just, go to your spirit and ask the question, is it inspiring? Will others follow my lead? You get a check in all 3. I give it to you, that's going to be an awesome decision, because the spirit never makes a decision that is not in the highest good of you, the other person, and the universe.
It's so
I don't get a check in all three. I don't do it.
Yeah.
I used to live from my intellect when Tariq was alive, but I recognized what saved me was my spirit. Today, I lead from there. I have a good friend that says, a mind is a dangerous place to go by yourself.
It is. Psychologists say that too. You know, Einstein also said imagination is more important than knowledge.
Right.
I'd like to continue with the discussion about spirit, since we are talking about that. And you do a great deal of meditation. You spoke, I think, before we were filming, that you were talking about God and God's embrace of you. This is very esoteric, or it could be very physical as well, but what does it feel like to be embraced by God? How do you know you're being embraced by God? What does this feel like for us? How can you explain this to our viewers?
It feels very safe, very loving, very compassionate. I always say that I've been meditating. I'm 73 now. I started at 20, so over 50 years. And that when you get into what they call samadhi, which I'm sure you heard of, where there is no thought or mantra, which is when I believe you are one with God, or one with your higher power, or whatever word you want to use, it literally feels like you've taken a dip in the river of love, compassion, and wisdom. It's hard to put words as to what that feeling is, because metaphysical concepts are hard to describe. But it's amazing experience. If you can get to samadhi, you know that there is such a thing as a special place in your body, your psyche, that is total joy, totally at peace, totally compassionate, and totally safe. And that's how I see God. It's not a man in the heaven with a big beard. It's that experience of total joy, peacefulness, safety, and access to universal wisdom. You know, I never not meditate, and it took me many years, but I always find the gap. I call it the gap, the samadhi, because it's absent of thought and mantra, and most people. And actually, I have two free download meditation on my website, which is my name, azimkhamisa.com. One is on forgiveness, because I teach a 4 half-day online course. In fact, I'm doing one next month, which is a very deep dive. I call it Strong in Spirit, into the process of forgiveness, based on my book that was published by Random House in 2009, called The Secrets of the Bulletproof Spirit, How to Bounce Back from Life's Hardest Hits. So there's a guided meditation on forgiveness, and then there's another guided meditation on manifesting your life's mission. And then there's a preamble, because I meditate 3 different times a day, but I do different things at those 3 different times. So if people are interested, they can listen to the preamble once, and then we're welcome to do either of these 2 guided meditations. And they are Western friendly, because I've studied some Eastern meditation practices, which sometimes are not so Western friendly, you know. It depends on, where you are in your journey, but I've created this particular meditation is very utilitarian, it's very useful, because there's purpose in the methodology I have. But I never not meditate. Even if I'm traveling, I may not get 2 hours, I might get an hour and a half, but I never not meditate. And if I had those days when my meditation wasn't complete, I feel like I'm on sea legs, you know? So it's an amazing tool, and it's a way we connect with your perception of what God is, but primarily it is to connect with your inner guidance, your higher power. You don't have to listen to me. All the answers you seek are already within you, and the way I connect with it is through meditation.
Mm-hmm. It's really interesting because I'm a big meditator myself. And I opened up through my meditation and went through the dark night of the soul as well. And they say God works in mysterious ways. Now, with the death of your beloved son, do you think that there was a purpose that God had in mind, if you will?
That's a great question, Anthony. And yes, and now that I look back at it, but let me explain it to you this way. Having done this work for 27 plus years, I've met some amazing human beings that are doing some amazing work in the world. I met His Holiness the Dalai Lama half a dozen times now. The first time I met him was in 2004. We were hosted by Pope John Paul. You might remember him. He died in 2005. He had a conference at his summer palace in Castel Gandolfo, and he invited 30 people from all over the world. A lot of them were monks and enlightened human beings. I was lucky to be one of the 30, although I was not quite in the class of the other 29. And what was so special about that meeting, we were there for 5 days. His Holiness joined us for 2 days, 15 hours in his presence. I took 9 pages of notes. And then I gave a lecture on the wisdom I garnered from this amazing human being. Happy to share the link with you, and you can share it with your audience. But the one thing that I'd like to ask, that I'd like to share with you based on your question, Anthony, is that His Holiness the Dalai Lama said, in the Buddhist tradition, we believe that everything that happens to us, we attract. Because essentially, we are all on a path to enlightenment, and the Spirit is nudging us toward our spiritual purpose, which was your question. We all have a spiritual purpose, but sometimes we don't know what that is. Not for me. The gift that came from my son's tragedy is it put me on my spiritual purpose. Because what has manifested in my life in the last 27 years is beyond my wildest dreams. But I had a hard time when His Holiness says everything that happens to us, we attract. And I said, I'm having a hard time with this, Your Holiness, because did I attract the murder of my son? No parent would do that. And he says, according to the Buddhist tradition, before you were born, we believe in every lifetime you have certain lessons to learn, because we're all on this journey towards enlightenment. And you had a contract with your son that before you were born and he was born, that he would come to you and would die tragically at the age of 20, because one of your lessons was forgiveness in this lifetime. But God gave us free will. So you still had to choose between revenge and forgiveness. You made the right choice. So in your next lifetime, you don't have to lose another son. It's an evolved view. But that made me feel that my son came into me and my family to help me and my family, because my daughter is the executive director of the Azim Khamisa Foundation, to put her and me on our spiritual purpose. So yes, God does work in mysterious ways. You mentioned that earlier.
Yeah, that's the Dharma, really. I mean, that's the Dharma. That's the, I mean, it's funny because we were raised in Christian, Catholic, little Judaism, not really, and then moved to Buddhism, Gnostic thinking, have been all over the globe. really connect to Shintoism in Japan.
Yes.
And now we're just, into oneness, whatever that is. And I think, both of us do believe that, this is not this, it is real, but it's not real. It's a perception in the sense that we are energy beings. And we do believe that we choose to come back to help and serve in whatever way, and that there are family members or friends or people in what you'd call a soul group that come to assist in that way. And that assistance could be dying of cancer. It could be being an alcoholic. It could be any of these things that are tragic in a way for us, so that we step into something greater than ourselves and serve for the greater good.
Right. Yeah. There's in every tragedy there is spiritual bullion. That's one of the chapters of my Bulletproof Spirit book.
Mhm.
That it's not just rubble. Right in the rubble is gold, but you have to seek it. Every cloud has a silver lining is another way to put it. Yeah.
Well, you have to be open to it.
Yeah.
You have to be open to it. And like you said,
I think the thing that I say is, you don't say, why me? That's a victim mentality. You say, why did I attract this to me? And then you get a different answer. So
Yeah.
I think that when you are, and we all get hard hits, this is life, right? There's no way around it. It's like, you're not going to play football and not get tackled. You're going to get hard hits. But when you do get a hard hit, the victim mentality would say, why me? A more evolved person would say, why did I attract this to me? And there you find the spiritual bullion, and you find the silver lining and the gold that is hidden right in the rubble. Because, pain is a good teacher.
yeah.
Yeah. I know you probably know Khalil Gibran because we are both very evolved, and you probably read The Prophet.
Oh, yeah. More than once.
Yeah, I keep it by my bedside. I probably read it 1,000 times. But if you remember, there is a beautiful passage. They're all beautiful, and he talks about love and marriage and children and work and everything. But this one is on joy and sorrow. And what Gibran is saying is that when you're feeling sorrow, joy is sleeping on your bed. And when you're feeling joy, sorrow is sleeping on your bed, because you feel sorrow and joy with the same faculty. And you can expand that faculty from either of these experiences and get more towards feeling more joy and dealing with more sorrow by expanding that faculty. And he gives his example of a potter that is so involved with making this masterpiece from clay that he actually wets the clay with his tears. But then when the masterpiece is complete, he has to take that masterpiece and put it in a 2,300 degree Fahrenheit oven for 18 hours so the clay can become porcelain and radiate its beauty. I know what it feels like to be in the 2,300 degree Fahrenheit oven.
Yeah.
And we've all had hard hits. But there, just as the masterpiece made out of clay become porcelain and radiate its beauty, sometimes you have to go through that pain so you can radiate your beauty, because we all have it. And sometimes the universe helps us express this sometimes through tragedy. Now, sometimes it comes through joy as well, but it can come either way.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. I mean, I feel, we've all gone through some dark night of the soul. And we were talking to Deborah Johnson. I think you know her because she's spoken at SAND, and I think you've been there. And she talked about the pain as the teacher and your friend, if you could only see it. Pema Chodron talks about this as well, right? That, it's a choice to see the pain as a teacher.
Right. And Rumi's talked about it too, because, a couple of quotes Rumi, very prolific. He says the cure for pain is in the pain.
Yes.
Unlike pain, if you get a slight headache, you want an extra strength Tylenol, and then 5 hours later, go take another one. What Rumi is saying is, the cure for pain is in the pain. So pain is an excellent teacher. And one of his other quotes I love is he says, the light enters through the wound.
Yeah, it does. It does.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
so I always shift my lenses about pain. Pain's not a bad thing. Now, the Dalai Lama would tell you that pain is unavoidable, but it's a teacher. Suffering is avoidable because suffering is self-inflicted. So that's a good distinction between pain and suffering,
Mm-hmm.
So if you espouse pain and you have the mentality to say, why did I attract this to me? It has some very powerful lessons and spiritual bullion in it, but you don't want to get into suffering because that's a self-infliction.
Yeah.
That's more of a victim mentality. Yeah.
And every culture teaches that, actually, in different words.
Right.
Speaking of, you spoke about the Quran and how when properly interpreted, it helps to penetrate hidden meanings.
Right.
It's kind of a segue to what we've really just been talking about. You wrote that it contains hints and symbolic images and expression and allegorical guides to higher metaphysical truths.
Right.
Anything that you can think of, right, that you might have garnered some wisdom from the Quran that we might not be aware of in the West.
As you pointed out, most wisdom tradition teach that, and the Quran's no different. But there is a quote in the Quran that says that we created you in different tribes so that you can learn from each other through understanding, not to slaughter each other. Mm-hmm. That through love and understanding that you become in the spirit of brotherhood. And the beauty of the Quran is it led me when I reached out to the grandfather of my son's killer, because we are different. He is African American. Although I was kidding, I said, please, I'm the African American because I was born in Africa, you were not. He's Christian and I'm Muslim. But the thing that went to me from this piece in Quran, which helped me to reach out to him, because I wanted to see how he was dealing with his grandson killing my son. I mean, in many ways, his journey is harder than mine. I mean, you can't hurt Tariq. He's dead. Mm. And Tony was the first 14-year-old tried as an adult. Mm. And he's worried about his grandson because he's in an adult prison, a good, charismatic young like. I mean, you know what our prisons are.
Yeah.
And when I was reading this piece in Quran that we created you in different tribes and religions so that you may reach out to each other with love and understanding, my motivation was, I called the district attorney that prosecuted my son's case. And I said, Peter, his name is Peter Deda, can you please introduce me to Tony's grandfather? I'd like to meet him. I want to know how he's dealing with it. Mm. And then he called the public defender who defended Tony. And we met in the public defender's office. It's a powerful meeting. I mean, he read about me and I read about him. He stayed in court. He's 2 tours of Vietnam as a Green Beret.
Wow.
And when I met him, we had a cellular connection. Now, people ask me, what kind of work do you do? I said, I don't work on the cognitive and the emotional level. I work on the cellular level. I actually coined the word.
What's it called? Cellular?
So I said, I work on the cellular level. I said, I don't do my teachings are not just on the cognitive and the emotional level, but they are at the cellular level, because science will tell you we are trillions of cells, but they're much deeper. We have a soul and a spirit. And when you transform at the cellular level, that transformation sustains. You're never the same person. So when I met the grandfather, we had a cellular connection, even without speaking a word.
I bet. Yeah. That doesn't surprise me at all.
We are the same age, and he meditates as well. And I told him, you know, I'm not here in the spirit of retribution and revenge because your grandson killed my son. Rather, what I see is we both lost a son. I'm sure you're dealing with some of the same emotions I am. And I wanted to see how you were doing, but more importantly, I've started this foundation with the lofty mission of stopping kids from killing kids. It's a big job. I can't do it by myself. Will you help me? And he was quick to take my hand of forgiveness. And he says, you know, Azim, ever since I found out my grandson was responsible for your son's murder, I went into the prayer closet. He's a Baptist from the South.
Wow.
Praying that someday I get to meet you so I can extend my condolences to you and your family. So thank you for reaching out to me. And of course, I will help you. We're together here 28 years later. He's as close to me as my own brother. So I share this because we are so divided as a country right now. And the tendency is we tend to hang around with people that are like us, that believe like us, and maybe even behave like us. We don't learn a lot from people that are just like you and believe like you and behave like you. I've learned so much from this man about the plight of African Americans in our society. Mm. I could have started an organization like Fathers of Murdered Sons, like, you know, Mothers Against Drinking and Driving, but I didn't. I started a foundation and reached out to my son's killer. And what came to me is that you don't create miracles when like-minded people come together. It's when opposites collide in harmony, that's when you manifest miracles.
That makes sense, actually.
Yeah, I like that.
That makes sense. I mean, you know, a couple of things that come to mind. It's kind of like, can you imagine, right? You know, Yeshua and Muhammad coming together, and that play that Picasso meets Einstein, right? These polar opposite energies. When they come together, that's when the real magic happens. Yeah,
when they collide in harmony, it's become sacred ground, you know, at least it has for me, you know. So.
Yeah, I mean, on that front, you know, Tariq's death brought you down roads that you never thought you would travel. And we've been talking about some of those. You know, you sit on boards, you have the foundation, nonprofit. Was there one that you can think of that was most surprising, right? Now that you look back, I'm sure that there are some that make more logical sense, right? Like, of course, I would come into contact with others who are working on forgiveness as an example. But what was the aha, like, wow, I didn't see this coming, that really shook your foundation?
That's a great question. It's the life after forgiveness, because it felt like I had to cross a chasm. And you can't cross a chasm in 2 steps. You've got to cross it in 1 step. And you can walk to the edge of a chasm and you look on the other side, and your intellect will tell you there's no way you can cross this in 1 step. But your spirit will tell you, not only can you cross this in 1 step, when you get to the other side, you're going to land on higher ground. And I have.
Beautiful.
Not that I wouldn't want my son back, but we all want abundance and good health and loving relationships. I just had my blood work done, and my doctor said, Azim, and I'm 73, he says, your blood work is always above average, but really this one is better than it was 2 years ago.
Oh, bravissimo.
Yeah. I said, well, you made my ear, because I never thought that, the older you get, you kind of go the other way. But I enjoy a level of peace is my trilogy. I have loving relationships. Not only with my daughter and my brothers and with players, but even my ex-mother-in-law was visiting my daughter when my first grandson was born. I'm real proud of him because he just graduated with 5.0 at Berkeley, studying nuclear engineering. He's just turned 18. He just started at Berkeley. But 18 years ago, she came. She's passed on. Maybe the good Lord would rest her soul in peace. And my daughter lives here. She runs the foundation. She lives in Escondido. And she called me. She says, Grandma is in town. I'm divorced. And she's made your favorite meal. So, you're kidding me, because ex-mother-in-laws don't do stuff like that, She says, I'm not kidding you, Dad. I said, seriously? She says, yeah. Oh, I thought, what's this about? So I am. So I went. I mean, I live by myself. I love home cooked food, and she's a great cook. Over dinner, she tells me, I wanted to acknowledge you. And she remembered, because I got divorced many years ago. And I get along with my ex-wife too. She's moved here and with her family. And she said, I wanted to make your favorite meal because you forgave my grandson's killer. I too had been able to forgive him.
Oh, wow.
And I'm
Powerful.
In tears thinking, who would have ever guessed? So, it was the right decision for me. Not that I wouldn't want my son back. Obviously, I would love to have him back in a New York second. But everything that has manifested in my life as a result of that choice is way beyond my wildest dreams. And I think that is where more people, if they get forgiveness, that they can enjoy more abundance, better health. And there are clinical studies that have now proven that forgiveness is good for your health, that enjoy loving relationships and focus their mind on their life's mission, because we all have a life's mission. Whereas all of this, resentment and guilt and hatred and anger are really debilitating emotions that stop you from functioning at your fullest potential. But when you forgive, you don't have to. People ask me, how do I know I forgive? And I say, when that person has a safe passage through your mind. When I think of Tony, don't get angry, my blood pressure doesn't go up. Finally, I met him when he was 19, and that was a really seminal moment. And we locked eyeballs, and I'm looking in his eyes, and we held that glance for what seemed like a long time. I'm looking in his eyes and looking for a murderer, and I didn't. I was able to touch his humanity, climb through his eyes, and see the spark in him was no different than in me or you. He was 19. He was remorseful, he was articulate, he was well-mannered, and didn't portray any of the typical attitudes of a 19-year-old in our society. What I'm trying to say, he was a likable kid.
Yeah.
I wasn't expecting that. And when I told him, I know I've forgiven you. I've been working with your grandfather for a good 4 years. And we had a 2-hour, man-to-man conversation. And when you come out, you can join the foundation. You can come work with us. And I've stayed in his life since he was 19, and finally been advocating for his parole. Finally, at 39, we went to the parole board. I was there, my daughter was there, and they grilled him for 7 hours. Gut-wrenching. He cried a lot through it. And then at the end, we were given a few minutes to speak, and I told the commissioner, I said, Tony has work to do, and that work is outside of the bars. I said, the foundation is now in its 20th year. And I said he will be instrumental in saving other kids from his previous lifeline and joining gangs. So please grant him parole so he can come and help the foundation and save more kids. And the commissioner was in tears. He says, Mr. Khamisa, I've been doing this work for 25 years. I've never had the offender's father and sister the victim's father and sister advocate for the offender's parole. I said, I always saw him as a victim as well.
Yeah.
And I've been in his life since he was 19. He's 39 now. He's not the same person, you can tell. You know what? Tony won parole, which never happens when you go the first time. And he was released in April of the next year. And then the governor had to sign off, which he did. And then with a halfway house. And he's now working, training as a plumber with a company that supports the foundation. And he's speaking with us. We just came back from a conference in Chicago, and we're doing programs. We reach tens of thousands of kids every year. And he's out there on stage telling, when I was 11, I joined a gang. When I was 14, I killed Mr. Khamisa's son. I wish I can turn the clock back. And he's turned out to be a fine man. I mean, I'm amazed. You can't tell. He spent from 14 to 39, 25 years in prison.
So maybe his soul knows that he has this work to do. So maybe it was so transformative for him that rather than live in the past, that transformation just comes through. Maybe, spirit really is speaking through him, just as spirit is speaking through you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There's a divine hand guiding this the whole time.
Yeah. I mean,
I always say it's not me. I'm just a conduit for the divine spirit. That's doing the work.
Yeah. I mean, it's always been said, right, that you can't heal what you can't feel. And, I was touched, and I don't know who this is, but I was touched by this quote or song, Kit Goldman attributed to Tariq's song.
Yeah.
And I just want to read this because it's just really beautiful. And it really echoes what we're talking about. Because if you can't feel it, how can we heal it? Right. I mean, it's something that's been said in every tradition. With love, our shattered hearts will heal. And it's love that fuels the voyage of his soul. But we'll have to feel pain we don't want to feel if we want our hearts to once again be whole. That's beautiful.
She was married, not anymore, but we're still very good friends. She was married to one of my best friends. And I helped with the initial programs we did for the kids. I love Kit. She's just a brilliant lady. And I have the highest regard for her.
How long did it really take you to truly heal and smile again, laugh again?
Well, I'll tell you, a good 3.5 years. I was dating a lady in Mexico, and she broke our relationship on Monday of the week Tariq died. On Thursday, my father had an 11-hour, 7 bypass operation, open heart. 4 bypasses they're done and 3 new ones. And on Saturday, I lost Tariq.
It always happens in threes.
Yeah.
It does.
So any one of those will throw you into a loop. So then I went into a lot of introspection. I started the foundation. I wrote my first book. I spent time with family and friends. But I spent a lot of alone time. I didn't date. I didn't have a social life. I had nothing to give. I was grieving. And grieving is medicine. And we talked about, the healthy way to grieve. Journaling is one. Scripture reading is one. Exercise is one. Meditation and prayer. But journaling, I would say, was my most. And also therapy, sometimes if you meet the right therapist. I remember I wrote this in my journal. There's nothing quite so painful as a broken heart.
Mm.
There's nothing quite so painful as a broken heart, but a broken heart is an open heart. If one can learn to live with an open heart, gentle transformations begin to manifest. So and Rumi actually had a better quote than that. Rumi said, God will break your heart over and over and over and over and over and over again until it stays open. That's Rumi.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
That's good.
That's very good. It says it all. And I didn't know this quote, but I gave a talk at Fetzer Institute, and Mark Nepo was a visiting scholar, said to me, hey, you're a Sufi, your opening quote really moved me, and you must know this quote by Rumi. I says, Mark, Rumi wrote 138,000 quotes. I don't know them all. So then he shared me with this quote about Rumi. So, I work hard to keep my heart open. And I always say, if you don't want your heart to be broken, because God will break it again, make sure it's open.
Yeah, I mean, really, spirit does not work through our mind.
Yeah. But coming back to your question, so I was on a speaking tour in Washington, D.C., and it was about three years after Tariq died, and I was still pretty raw. I was still in that grieving process. And I don't know, I'd given like 8 or 9 talks in less than 5 days, and I was still pretty open and raw. And this last one was for the Coalition of Juvenile Justice. And the lady that invited me, I told her, I said, as soon as I finish my talk, my flight to go back to home leaves 2.5 hours from the time I finish my talk, and the airport is an hour and a half away. Mm. And I said, most people want to talk to me or shake my hand or give me a hug. And I said, if I do that, I will never make my flight, and I need to get home. I've been giving too many talks and I'm still grieving. She said, don't worry about it. She was a tiny little thing, but she pulled me through the crowd. It was probably 600-700 people, and had a car waiting for me, and put me in the car. And she said, I wrote you a little note. So I took the note from her, and I made my flight. And on the way to the airport, she wrote a very nice note saying that, thank you for doing this. And if you're ever back in DC, and if you want me to pick you up and show you around, I'll really be happy to do that. And please call me. And I thought, oh, she likes me. So we ended up dating. And then it was long distance. But we dated, I think for about a year or so. And then we were out about 6 months into our relationship. And I cracked a joke. And we all laughed. And she said to me, are you okay, Azim? I said, yeah, I'm totally fine, man. I've got time. I'm, having a ball. She says, why did you go like this? Because I covered my mouth. And I said, you know what? It feels weird to laugh. I haven't laughed for 3.5 years. And then I knew the clouds had finally parted. Wow. It took a long time, yeah.
And it was so foreign for you that your first instinct was to cover your mouth.
Yeah, because when you're grieving, it's a lot of introspective work.
Yeah.
That's why I say that, grieving is medicine. There's a good adage from the Turkish tradition that says, he who conceals his grief does not find a remedy for it.
Yeah. I mean, we can't hide from this stuff. That's the thing. I mean, even the divisiveness that we're seeing around our country and the world right now, it's all the ugliness is coming up to be healed. It's being named, everything.
Right.
The racism that we're seeing, the bigotry, all of it.
Yeah.
It feels like it's bigger than it's ever been.
Sometimes the pendulum has to swing the other way before it can come back,
That's right. Mm-hmm. That's what I was trying to say with my terrible dinosaur dragon analogy. Do you have a final question?
I just want to, first of all, I want to thank you for everything that you're doing to help children,
Yeah.
young adults, to really find compassion in their hearts and to move away from violence. As a speech and language pathologist, I used to work in the New York City school districts, and I saw a lot of violence. And I didn't see any curriculum that spoke about compassion, that spoke about nonviolence, that spoke about forgiveness. And I really think that in all of these schools, whether it's New York City, Chicago, LA, we need a curriculum that's going to get to these children so that it can become ingrained into them and learned and practiced
That nonviolence is a choice.
as they become adults,
Right.
and they pass it on to their children.
And we have that. We have a 10-week curriculum, Anthony. The first of the 4 programs for youth is the live assembly with me and the grandfather, and now me and Tony sometimes. And then we have a 10-week curriculum teaching accountability, empathy, compassion, forgiveness, peace building. And we have 3 levels of it. The first one is 4th and 5th graders. The second one is 6th and 7th. The third one is 8th and 9th. So it's age and grade specific. Then we create a peace club on campus, which is a leadership program, about 60 different titles. Or what does it take to be a nonviolent leader committed to peace building and peacemaking in yourselves, in your families, in your schools, in your community. And our 4th program is a mentoring program. The first 3 program goes to the entire school. The mentoring goes to the 8 to 12% of the kids in our inner cities are on that slippery slope like Tony was. So our mentors work with this population, not only in school, but in the home and the community. So the 4 program together is what we call the Safe School model. And we're definitely moving along, and we provide direct services in San Diego County. There's 42 school districts here. But when we go out of San Diego County, we become a training institute.
Mm-hmm.
So if you know of somebody that listens to this particular conversation, by the way, it's been very rich. Thank you for
Yeah, it's been amazing.
And if they're interested in bringing our Safe School model, please have them email me, and we'll be happy to talk with them. And I'm also very happy if they want to reach out to me on my website or on social media. I'm very happy to send a free copy of the book you were reading, From Murder to Forgiveness, a free PDF digital copy to them. So, please offer it to them as a gift from me.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah,
that
that's
is wonderful.
amazing. Yeah, because it's a great read.
Yes.
I know it's your first book, but it's evergreen, right? It just, the lessons and the insights and the wisdom that are in that book will help anyone who's grieving the loss of, a death that is unnecessary or it feels tragic, right? However that comes about. Well, this has been an incredible conversation. And I just want to add and remind people that From Murder to Forgiveness is the first of a trilogy. The second book is Forgiveness to Fulfillment. And then the third book is From Fulfillment to Peace, which you say is the final receipt for lasting and sustainable peace.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
So everyone should buy all 3 books.
All right. Yeah. The portal to peace for me was forgiveness. This is a 20+ year journey that started very dark, ended with peace, and the portal was forgiveness. And I hope that more people are able to find that.
Well, and you were already spiritual, but it seems, or we feel that anyway, I feel it, that you've become even more spiritual, deeper in your spiritual practice as a result of going through this.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a never-ending journey, as I said, It's not a destination, it's a journey.
It's definitely a journey. Man, we are just so grateful to have this time with you. And we will include links to those free guided meditations and your website and ways to reach you. and your books, of course, so people can purchase them and read them and get some peace and solace from them. Are there any parting words that you would like to give viewers who are listening?
Well, I'll give you this quote that was part of my trilogy. I wrote after 9/11, which we all remember where we were on 9/11. It's heavy on our hearts, but it's a little heavier on my heart because the atrocity was perpetrated by people from my faith. And I went into this very introspective space where the same faith helped me to get to forgiveness, you know? So it took me many months to find out it's not the faith, it's geopolitics and money and oil and petrodollars and the industrial military complex, as one of our presidents called it. And what came out is this quote which says that sustained goodwill creates friendship. And that ought to be obvious. You make friends by extending goodwill over a long period of time. Sustained goodwill creates friendship. Sustained friendship creates trust. Sustained trust creates empathy. Sustained empathy creates compassion. And sustained compassion creates peace. So I call this my peace formula. Well, friendship, trust, empathy, compassion. But people ask me, how do you extend goodwill to the person who murdered your child? I say you do it through forgiveness. As it's evident, it worked for me, it worked for my family. What I believe is a miracle, it worked for him and his family. It can work for you and your family. It can work for Israel and Palestine and Afghanistan and Iraq and Iran and Syria and, of course, Russia and Ukraine. It can work for the US of A.
Yeah.
So let me leave you my parting words that peace is possible. How do I know that? Because I am at peace. So thank you very much and namaste.
Wow, that's beautiful.